Hey, everybody. If you're listening to this, you are listening to the first free hour of this episode of The Shift with Doug McKenty. If you like what you're hearing, please consider subscribing to the show in order to access the full feature-length versions of the podcast, as well as have access to the members forum, where we discuss potential topics and interviews and dive deep into the overall concept of the shift. For only $6 a month, not only do you get the full-length episodes, but also an opportunity to co-create with me, your host, Doug McKenty, the future of the show. Go to www.theshiftnow.com or patreon.com/theshift and sign up today in order to help make the shift possible. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Good morning, noon, or night, wherever and whenever you are listening to The Shift. I am your host. My name is Doug McKenty. Today, I have the great pleasure of introducing Foster Gamble onto the show. Foster, along with his wife Kimberly, are executive producers of the revolutionary documentary series Thrive. The first movie, Thrive, What on Earth Will It Take?, has become one of the most watched documentaries in world history since its release in 2011. The movie focuses on the image of the torus based on ancient wisdom as well as modern science, which represents the ability of balanced, natural systems to tap into an unlimited unified field of energy that can provide the resources to create a thriving world for us all. This seemingly radical notion is the foundation for many cultures around the world and has simply been forgotten by many of us who exist in a post-colonial world. With the much anticipated release of Thrive 2, This Is What It Takes, last September, the duo took it to the next level, explaining how the torus energy theory is being used to increase health, provide energy needs, and raise consciousness around the world. This is a must-watch documentary series which also describes current attempts by a controlling elite to centralize power in the hands of a few, and provides alternative solutions based on self-organizing systems founded on a philosophy of individual freedom. Go to thriveon.com for more information or to watch the videos, and subscribe to participate in Foster and Kimberly's ongoing efforts to create a thriving world. You can find more information about The Shift at The Shift with Doug McKenty on Facebook, YouTube, and all your favorite podcast hosting sites. Or go to www.theshiftnow.com for hours of free content or to subscribe to the full-length feature versions of all episodes. If you like what you're hearing, please like, subscribe, and share this conversation on social media. In the age of shadow banning and censorship, we rely on listeners like you to spread the word. Enjoy this conversation between myself and Foster Gamble. I want to thank him for agreeing to this interview, and thank you for helping to make the shift. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this 61st episode of The Shift. I am so pleased today to be joined by Foster Gamble, the executive producer of the Thrive documentary series. They just came out with the second Thrive installment last month. I guess it was 6 weeks ago, maybe now, and that was as excellent as the first. So congratulations on all the work that you've been doing, Foster. And I just want to say in preface to this conversation that you and your wife, Kimberly, probably resonate with my philosophy as much as anyone else in the field. I really appreciate the work that you do and the word that you're getting out there and the way that you describe the bigger picture to everyone, both the positive side and the negative side of the things that you see are going on in the world today. Really appreciate it. Really excited to have this conversation with you. Do you want to just let my audience know a little bit about your history and about the Thrive documentaries in general?
Sure. Well, in a nutshell, since I was a teenager and had a traumatic experience around being told that ducking under my desk would be my best protection from a nuclear bomb.
Sure.
I dedicated myself to finding out how can human beings relate better to energy and better to each other. And it's taken many different twists and turns in the road, but it's led to a tremendous sense of coherence about what the problems are, that are literally threatening our very existence, and also solutions that are commensurate to the problem. And that's when we made Thrive 1, launched it in 2011, that laid out a lot of the diagnosis of what's in the way, of our thriving. And then
Hmm.
we never thought we'd make another documentary. But what we saw after Thrive 1 came out, we were contacted by 1,000 innovators from all over the world and spent 5 years traveling around checking stuff out. And it was so exciting, it was so encouraging that when we would share it with people, they'd be like, wow, I finally feel some hope. I feel proud to be human again when you tell me about these things. So Kimberly and I sat down and just talked it over and looked at each other and said, okay, we got to do this. We've got to get this good news out to humanity. So that's very much what Thrive 2 is about. Took about 1,000 days, but it, as you said, it came out about 6 weeks ago, and we're getting a wonderful reception from this one as well. It takes the whole thing to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I really appreciate about the documentaries is that you can remain positive. I mean, there's so much negative news, especially and with the documentaries, you're waking people up to what you call the global domination agenda. So much news that can be depressing for people, so difficult to kind of awaken out of, and awaken into maybe this understanding that we really are living in oppressive times where just a very few very wealthy people have so much control, and it's so easy to start to wallow in the negativity of all of that, especially the powerlessness that I think a lot of people do end up feeling once they start to understand that this is what's happening to them. And in the documentaries, you do a great job of especially in the conclusions, concluding in a very positive light, but throughout the entire both documentaries, balancing the negative and the positive out. Do you want to describe that process a little bit, especially for those of my listeners that are just learning some of this stuff? It's a difficult process, this kind of awakening
Yeah.
into the real reality of the situation that we're living in.
Well, in this communication aperture that I've opened recently at Thrive On, the name of it is the Freedom Portal, but the subtitle is "There is light at the end of the rabbit hole,"
Hmm. Right.
because I've been down that rabbit hole so many times, literally thousands and thousands of times over the decades, that I know it well. I know what it takes. And the powers that want to be in control of our lives, they know it really well also. So they do everything they can to stop people's thinking at level 2. The other subtitle for the show is Seven Levels Deep for one of the shows, and it takes 7 levels to actually confront a situation and then end up having resolved the conflict. And so the if they can get us to stop at just looking at their spin, what they say on TV, or what you see in the newspapers and so forth, if they can get us to believe their spin, then not only will we be hopeless, depressed, but we'll be at each other's throats.
Right.
And so we've
Right.
got to keep going past level 2, and that's when you start going down the rabbit hole. You need to follow the money. You need to look for like the investigators do, for the means and motive and opportunity. And if you do that diligently, and there's a lot of people out there who can help now, it takes you to the source of the destructive nature of what's going on, and which can be really discouraging.
Yeah.
Because it's a nasty, and it's a vicious agenda that is very far along. But it's only when you get that then you've got what you need to begin to resolve it. For many years, I taught the martial art of Aikido, which is a nonviolent martial art. And I know from experience what my teachers taught me and I passed on is you've got to be aware of your reality. You've got to open your eyes to what's going on if you're going to protect yourself and your loved ones. So once you get that, what's really going on, then you can begin to shape your own path, then learn how to collaborate with others. And if you've got the right principles, that will take us to a thriving world.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you discuss in your experience, because I have such a difficult time even having conversations with my neighbors about my belief system, and it's become almost overwhelming for me. I mean, my research has actually gone to this place where I'm starting to describe how how many people are involved in almost a cult. I've been doing a lot in a few episodes now, and I'm going to do more about this idea of scientism, where so many people have this belief system that this is what science says, and it's completely logical and rational, but it's somehow tied into the authority, it's what the authoritarian scientists say that they believe science is proven. Even when I offer them, peer-reviewed studies or the opinions of other scientists, they say, well, those people must be quacks because they're not the experts. And so from your research, where does this perception of reality come from? I mean, obviously inundated from the media and then the academy. But how can it be so complete? I mean, this is what, most people can't break out of it because they're inundated with this information that you and I can see is not true information and is giving a false reality. But so many are unwilling, and then they run into this cognitive dissonance, right, where they just can't even believe in alternative information because they think it would be in the New York Times if it was true. That's kind of a broad question, I guess, but maybe you can just launch it from there.
No, it's such an important one. And actually, what we're going to be addressing all next month is what you mentioned at first of how can we get better at having these difficult conversations?
Yeah.
Because we've all been set up to not have those conversations successfully.
Right.
Because it's humbling. A lot of people say, well, I don't think it's a conspiracy. Maybe it's just incompetence. People need to wrap around that not only are these people brilliant, it's a shrewd brilliance, it's a nasty brilliance, it's a non-compassionate brilliance, but they literally recruit the best and the brightest from top schools, and they've been doing this for 200 years. And then they either they mind control them, they brainwash them, or they co-opt them, bribe them, or threaten them into collusion. And then they have been practicing this mass social engineering for at least 200 years, since the founding of the Illuminati. More like 250. The Illuminati was literally founded, and this is not some Hollywood B movie or something like that. The Illuminati are very real. They were founded in 1776. No coincidence at all. When there was a declaration of independence by free-thinking, free market people, that was a real threat to the financial powers that be. And in Europe, they realized they had lost that war, so they literally dedicated themselves to winning back the West, and particularly America, but doing it covertly instead. And this is fully documented if people actually want to know. And their core strategy was, they didn't use the same words at way back then, but it was basically socialism, create fascism, and set them against each other. Every time that a major battle is fought, we will come in and promise the rescue, and the rescue will be give us more authority in the form of bigger government. Then we control the money, and ultimately we'll win the entire game, which is total control over the entire planet. And of course, that sounds like some ridiculous movie also. But the movies are actually modeled after that. It's not the other way around. So they're very, very good at what they do. And they wake up in the morning dedicating each day and trillions of dollars to accomplishing that task. Now, that puts us at a real disadvantage if we're going up against that. And the good news, as I say in Thrive 2, is that fortunately, we've got the life force, we've got the truth, we've got love, and we've got most of humanity as they wake up are actually on our side, wanting people to thrive.
Yeah. I think since you brought up the Illuminati and going back that far, why don't we talk a little bit about the left-right paradigm? Because this develops shortly thereafter, and I think you and I would agree it's not by accident. And I find the left-right paradigm to be the most frustrating aspect. When I try to have conversations with other people, they instantly want to pigeonhole me into either left or right, depending on what we're talking about, And because my ideas don't really fit inside of that, but then they have their perception from the left or the right, and they want to argue from that point of view. And it's just fascinating how, I think we've got, until we get out of the left-right paradigm, there's very little hope that the mass of people can kind of wake up outside of it. And so you discuss how the Illuminati was created in 1776. And then we have the writings of Hegel in the 1820s, and then Marx in the 1840s and 50s. And this is the creation of the left-right paradigm. And it's basically just the difference between what they call the end of history, which is, how is history going to end? Is it going to end with this social democracy, or is it going to end with this communist state? But it's just this notion that we're traveling in this straight line, right? And that the end of history, and I guess the end of history by their terms, is supposed to be when reason is used to control, like, socially engineer our culture. And so we're not evolving naturally through this process, this historical process anymore, but we've transcended it with our, what Marx would call, scientific socialism. And the issue is that if you're on the left or the right of the paradigm, you're still thinking that you're participating in this very linear process going towards the end of history, whether you are arguing that the end is this, Republican democracy, or the end is this socialist utopia. And you've come out of entirely the notion of participating in a natural cyclical pattern of history, what you've described as it's a nonlinear self-organizing system. And I wish that people could get back to this idea that actually we live in the state of nature and we live in a self-organizing system. But it's so difficult to even get people to contemplate that when we're arguing between what is the end of history, within the left-right paradigm.
Well, they made sure that they got us in kindergarten.
Right.
And then in the Sunday schools in churches, and had us basically a mandatory lockdown most of the year, most of the day, most of the week, for at least 12 years, oftentimes 16 years, during which time it is never discussed that the course of history has shown us that the more sovereign we are as individuals, the more happy we are, the more healthy, the more secure, and the more prosperous. That you're not allowed to talk about that as a teacher in public schools, because of course that would have people question the very notion that anybody should be ruling us. And this is where we mention this, we go into it some in Thrive 1, we go deeply into it in Thrive 2. I'm writing a major book on it now, and I've dedicated the rest of my life to this conversation. And as you say, it can be a challenging and lonely one, because 99% of the population of the planet probably believes that they have to be ruled by someone, and therefore they better get on the side of the rulers. And then that becomes the entire game. And the most radical notion that Kimberly and I are trying to share with people is true equal rights. And of course, it's the most obvious notion of all. The one thing we found in our travels over the last 20 years, the one thing we found that everybody agrees to, because it's not easy to get people to agree on, what to have for dinner, much less, how to run the world. The one thing we found everybody agrees on is they don't want to be violated against their will. So maybe that's the basis of the universal morality that we've been missing, because we don't have a universal morality. We had the no morality, then we had the church morality, and now we've got the state morality, and it's taken us to the brink of self-destruction at a global scale. So what would be the basis of the universal morality? And that's where we suggest the only good candidate is the non-aggression principle, where no one is allowed to initiate force against anyone else except in true self-defense.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard in one of the online seminars that you're doing on the Saturday mornings, you described someone that talked about how the way that they feel is that following the authority figure is the moral action. And I think we find that that's ubiquitous. A lot of people have that idea. It's like, I remember, as I got into my 20s and I've been learning some of these libertarian ideas, thinking that, I had this feeling that if I didn't pay my taxes, then I was going to go to hell. And I didn't understand even, where does that come from? Like, how did that translate from growing up in a Christian family to my taxes, to being subservient to the state? I mean, I probably dedicated the last 30 years of my life to trying to understand how we've been inculcated with this belief system that the authority is the morality, and not with the idea that, morality actually comes from yourself. It comes from right action and virtuous action from an individual perspective. Um, this is part of the big hurdle, I think. I mean, would you agree? This is in having conversations with people, they simply want to believe and trust the authority and believe the moral action is to follow what the authority says, and it's subconscious, but it's all over the place.
Yeah, and the challenge I think is to really respectfully invite someone very carefully and very gently to inspect the coherence of their own moral system,
Hmm.
because it breaks down for virtually everyone, and especially on the left. The left is dedicated mostly to the word fairness, and the right is dedicated mostly to the word freedom. Now, there are huge shortcomings on both sides, particularly because they're all using the state to try to get their way. But the fairness doesn't hold up. It takes the form of stealing from some people in order to give to other people and to try to get equal outcomes, which nature just doesn't do, and all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff. And on the right, there's a self-righteous kind of warmongering, telling people what they need to do behind closed doors in their own bedrooms and so forth. But it's all, as you say, back in the left-right paradigm. So one of the reasons I think for the not only the violence that you see in the streets with Antifa and BLM and so forth, but in the the reaction, the reactionary explosion, escalation that happens trying to have conversations with people on the left, since they don't have a good moral argument, because their whole push for big government is about, we're going to tell you how to live your life. We're going to take a certain amount of your money, how we want, and we're going to go do what we want with it. Since it's based on violence, on theft at its core in the form of taxation, it's really uncomfortable because I know a ton of people on the left, and they're virtually all really good people. They want
Hmm.
to be virtuous,
Hmm.
but
Right.
they're at the core they're not, and it's out of ignorance. It's not out of intention, but they can sense when they don't have a good, clear, coherent argument, so they just start yelling and shaming and escalating instead. And it not only is
Right.
awkward and uncomfortable in a conversation, but taken to its logical outcome, it leads to civil war. And it's the same on the right, since they're more dedicated to freedom. There's more kind of live and let live to a certain extent,
Yeah.
and you don't see violent right pro. I'm not talking about like neo Nazis or something like that. I'm just talking about, you don't see violent conservative protests. But at the same time, as the left is pushing the right towards this incipient civil war, they're going to be in for a big surprise, because there's a lot of people on the right who don't want to start things, but they're willing and very highly trained in fighting if they have to.
Right.
But the problem is that it's all leading toward an ultimate confrontation rather than entertaining the question, okay, if every government in history has been corrupt and everyone has ultimately been either fallen apart or been replaced in a civil war or a revolution or something like that, what's in common to all of them? And what we suggest is it's the cancer of the belief in authority itself. So that's the conversation I think we need to have enough of us have and act on as soon as possible if we're going to make it. And it doesn't have to be 7 billion people. It takes, I think, in key places, from my research, it takes, Revolutionary War was 5 to 6% of the people.
Right.
Ken Wilber says it takes 10% to change a paradigm. The cultural creatives that are already measured between 25 and 35% in the US and in Japan and in Europe. So we're very much there in terms of well-intentioned people, and we're creeping up there in terms of people actually educated in how to think and how to act beyond the left-right paradigm.
Yeah, I mean, you brought this up in the Second Thrive documentary, which is this concept of decentralization, and that centralization is actually the main issue. And I was so pleased when you made that point specifically, because I've done so many episodes and I've had a lot of left-wing people on, and I've been trying to to balance them out in order to kind of transcend the left right paradigm and get people to see that there's positive aspects to both sides. But I've been frustrated because it not only has it not really produced the results that I wanted, but more and more, like you described, the left wing. And it's so ironic that in the last 4 years of Trump, where the rhetoric has gotten so heated about how the right wing are the fascists,
Right.
from my perception, and in my own community, I mean, from my actual experience, it's the progressives that are actually becoming extremely dangerous in terms of the fact that they they don't seem to mind the censorship. Like, they're so convinced that their point of view is correct that they no longer care about having an open conversation, and they don't seem to respect the other side's point of view. And just like what you're talking about, what I've seen is mostly the left is pushing on the right, and the right is just like they're kind of reacting. And then anytime they react, it's like, well, so there's a white nationalist, or there's, the Nazi is coming out. But they're really, I mean, just take this whole hate speech argument and then the social justice thing. And I've seen this evolving over the years where people on the left start saying, hey, you know, you have white privilege, let's say. I mean, I remember the white privilege conversation. And then people on the right were like, well, I don't really feel that privileged. And then people on the left will be like, well, you're a racist if you don't understand your privilege. And then people on the right are just trying to say, I just have these feelings, this point of view, and I'd like to express it in a free speech. I found that a lot of the people on the right were actually just promoting free speech and maybe the right of people to speak in a way that was not politically correct. And the left has just been hammering and hammering and hammering and saying, no, now we're going to censor you. Now we're going to take you out. And with the COVID thing happening, now it's like everybody's got to wear a mask. Everybody's got to line up for the vaccine. Everybody's got to start getting contact traced. This is starting to get very dangerous.
No, it's really dangerous. And I don't know if you've seen, but G. Edward Griffin has a video of an interview that he did with a KGB refugee. Somebody who turned, did you see that one?
Mm-hmm.
Well, for your viewers, if they haven't seen it, it's chilling. This guy's in 1969. He did this, and he describes the whole communist plot to take over the U.S., and he describes it strategically in terms of feminism, in terms of racism, in terms of socialism, and leading to communism. And it's exactly what we're seeing today, because I have many, many left-wing friends, and I've talked with hundreds of young people, college-age people and so forth, at conferences and so forth. And I ask them all, the proponents of socialism, I say, so what is your working definition of socialism? And this has been going on for years. Not a single one, hundreds, if not thousands, not a single one has a working definition. They say, well, I guess I've just kind of assumed it's when the government finally starts taking care of the people.
Yeah.
And that says it in a nutshell. They're well-intentioned. They want people to be taken care of. And this is absolutely what they've been indoctrinated in. It used to be just the universities. Now it's all the way down to elementary school. They're indoctrinated in this. And they're never told not only that Marxism ends in mass poverty, incarceration, torture, and slaughter, but that Marx and Lenin and Stalin themselves, in their own writings, said we have to accomplish this global communist revolution by any means necessary, and violence is fine whenever you need it.
Right.
So that's the training that BLM is coming out of, that Antifa is coming out of, and now the college-age kids, they're just taught not to question that at all. Just be politically correct so nobody shames you and you'll get along. Well, Stalin made it very clear that once they've succeeded with their revolution in a particular region, then the leaders turn around and destroy the minions. So we're on the verge of something very dangerous, not only in the U.S., but this is going on all over the world.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that's been really interesting to me, I mean, you talk about the definition of socialism, but I know also I've seen you defining fascism as well, because when you ask somebody what fascism is, they have no idea what that is. And one of the things, I've pondered this in the past and kind of realized, well, fascism is actually an economic system. It doesn't require a dictatorship or a certain kind of government, although it often coincides with a certain type of government. But it's an economic system where the government works with the corporations to produce goods and services for the people. And if you ask a socialist in this country, like, what do you want? Well, we want socialized healthcare. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means the government buys the stuff from the pharmaceutical companies and then gives it to the people for free, right? So it's like, wait a minute, this who's benefiting? I mean, like you like to say, follow the money. The pharmaceutical companies are going to get billions of dollars off of this single payer idea, and not only that, but they're going to have a captive market where everybody's forced to use their products. It's the classic definition of fascism. And when we have our political arguments, I mean, that's another thing that's so frustrating about it is like the way that we have political dialogue in this country is so twisted. We don't even have a foundational set of definitions about what we're talking about. So people are just yelling at each other and they're not communicating with each other. And it never actually produces a solution. It only ever seems, as you've noticed, to serve the global domination agenda.
Yeah, exactly. A situation that looks bad for most people, I finally learned to keep looking for, okay, for whom is this a win? And
Right.
all of this chaos, all the economic breakdown, which they're trying to create now with COVID, along with wars and all the other stuff, it all serves the agenda of getting the hundreds of millions of armed freedom lovers in the West, getting them out of the way, getting them so desperate that people will welcome socialism or fascism. They're really the same thing.
Yeah.
They're different pinchers on the same crab. There's just two ends of authoritarian, totalitarian tyranny, really.
Right.
And so they end up coming together. When you are arrested and thrown in prison and tortured or killed, it doesn't matter what you call it.
Yeah.
You got duped, somebody taken over. And that's exactly what they're trying to do right now. And by the way, for your audience, I didn't give a working definition. The real definition of socialism is that when you have the means of production in the hands of the state. So like you were saying, that with healthcare and with education and with transportation, and of course with the money itself, where literally everything except your body and your personal property are owned by the state. Well, that's a very short step away from communism, which is the same as socialism, except they take your property and that includes your body, and then they own you and the whole thing. And the result, is over 200 million people slaughtered by their own rulers in the 20th century alone. So that's the challenge that we're at now. And fortunately, I'm seeing tremendous signs of people waking up. We've kind of gone down the rabbit hole here with people, but there are more and more people. Thank goodness humanity's been able to keep the internet reasonably open. And I was just watching the congressional hearings where some of the Facebook and Twitter and so forth, they're finally getting challenged at the next level. But anyway, we've kept the internet open enough to do things like what you and I are doing right now, to be able to have this conversation. I mean, it's conceivable that within 2 years, there'll be no way we could have this conversation at all if it keeps going the way they want it to go. But I was invited to speak at a conference called Anarchapulco in Mexico a couple of years ago. And the history of that conference was that the first year is really about voluntarism, about the free market, voluntary exchange, owning yourself, that type of thing. And the first year, I think they had 150 people. The next year, they had 300. The next year, it was 600. And the next year, they had a waiting list, sold out 1,500 seats,
Nice.
A month early. And when I was there, I got to talk with a lot of people, and they were coming in from the left. They were coming in from the right, all ages. They were coming in from all different countries. And I've seen signs in both Venezuela and Brazil where thousands of young people marching with signs that say things like "less Marx, more Mises." So it is happening. because it's the truth. It's not an ism. Voluntarism is not an ideology of coercion like socialism, fascism, communism, and even democracy. They're all modes of coercing the masses. And the voluntarism is actually the condition of not doing that, of having freedom. And it
Right.
leads to such creativity and prosperity that the would-be rulers, it's the last thing they want you to know about. So the Department of Homeland Security a few years ago sent out a notice. I saw a copy of this to all the police departments across the U.S. with the top 10 threats to U.S. security. And the number one was sovereign individuals.
Right. I know.
Yeah, we really got to worry about them.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to control everybody, you do need to worry about sovereign
Absolutely.
individuals,
Yeah.
because they keep waking people up that they don't need to follow other people's commands.
Well, what's funny, and you mentioned Anarchapulco. I mean, I've spent a lot of time because I wanted to distill the left-right paradigm down into its essence. So I'd go on Facebook. One of the things I use Facebook for is I'd go to the anarchist capitalist sites, and I'd go to the anarchist communist sites,
Right.
and I'd really try to flush it out. Okay, let's figure this out. Who's right or who's wrong or whatever. And exactly what you're talking about, the anarcho-communists, as much as they have this vision that I don't think is true, and I don't think it's been played out, but they believe that if you have a free society, a voluntarist society, then it's going to be dog eat dog competitive until the strongest person comes out on top, and then we're going to have the current system, the corporate system with a few people on top. I mean, I don't think that's plays out when I've tried to ask them to flush this out or given examples of other, cultures or situations where freedom existed and this didn't happen. I don't get an answer. And then there are other things too, like I think the two biggest issues were, one, a lot of them, if you use a currency, then you're automatically playing the game, and you're going to, eventually the person who controls the currency is going to dominate everything. And then it's like, well, I think the problem now is the fiat currency, is the monopoly on currency, not the currency itself. I don't really get a response from that.
No, they don't have one.
Right.
That-
I mean,
that's
and
the
then
water's edge for them.
and then I ask, what are you going to do if somebody decides to make a currency and trade with their next door neighbor for something? What are you going to do? And they don't have an answer for that, because the only answer is, we're going to go after them and we're going to force them to stop. I mean, that's just my thing. The other thing is being a landlord. If you rent from a landlord, then you're automatically being oppressed. Well, what happens if I choose to rent a room from somebody? Well, are they going to force me not to, using I just don't get it. Where conversely, in the voluntarist philosophy, if you want to go live on a commune, nobody's going to stop you. If you want to start a workers cooperative, then please do, by all means. I mean, the anarcho-capitalist perspective allows you to be as communist as you want to be, as long as you don't hurt people who aren't participating in your particular lifestyle choice. And I just couldn't, at the end of the day, I felt this aggression from the sort of these idealized communists, these anarcho-communists, just on principle against the quote unquote anarcho-capitalists. And I prefer the term voluntarist, or now even the term agorist, just to get away from it all entirely. Like, look, you can do whatever you want, and then defend yourself when you're aggressed upon. And this is going to work. We can do this, people.
Yeah, the anarcho-communists don't want any rulers in the way of their ruling.
Right. I mean,
But I think that I love that you go on the sites and do that.
I really tried.
Your quest for the truth has been it's inspiring, and it goes along with my own quest a lot, which is, I think that what I've come down to is the three most important questions. Once you get the coherence of voluntarism, of the non principle, then the three most important questions I try to talk with people about are: number one, has that ever worked? Is there any indication that could work? and yes, throughout history, to whatever degree it's allowed to work, people
Right.
are safer, they're more prosperous, and they're
Yeah,
happier.
yeah, I
Uh,
know, right?
but then the predatory class will come in order to seize the wealth that these entrepreneurs have
Yeah.
created every single time in the U.S., in Sweden, in Norway, in Chile, in Venezuela, that all over the place. That's what happens. But the evidence is there. But just by comparison, if you look at North and South Korea, you look at Russia versus, the Soviet Union versus the U.S. You look at the North versus the South in England during the Industrial Revolution. The contrast is very stark, and it
Mhm.
just comes down to voluntary exchange or not. But so that's question number one. Has it ever worked? My research goes, yeah, absolutely. So keep going. So then
Yeah.
the next question is, okay, how could it possibly work in the future? And that I've spent the last decade literally studying that, and that's what I'm writing the book on.
Nice.
Because until you understand that it doesn't mean as we go to a free society that there won't be organizations. You'll have institutions and clubs and associations and businesses, everything except coercive authoritarian
Mhm.
ones. So all the things that we want to have in a society, transportation and security and education and insurance and security, justice, dispute resolution, all that would be taking place, but it would be taking place so much better because instead of being done by a monopoly on authority that doesn't have your best interests in mind, it'll be done by competing organizations in a free market. So they have to have decent prices, they have to have good quality in order to survive, and then they're all held accountable personally to the non-aggression principle. So that's the key that opens up the doorway to, we would have free energy, we would have cancer cures, we'd have all sorts of banks and all sorts of schools and everything. Beyond even our imagination, how
Mhm.
fantastic it would be. And then, so that's question number two is, well, how could it possibly work? And, in my Freedom Portal thing, we're going to be laying that out over the next few months with, bringing some real expert guests on to explain that. But then, okay, if you see that it has worked and it could work all the way, then the big question is, how do we get there? And I'm not going to go into that a whole lot now. But the most interesting part of it is that no one is going to create a business plan and then impose freedom on other people.
Right.
It actually is going to be, by definition, the result of billions of individuals being freely creative in every different sector, as long as they don't violate anyone else. But
Right.
there are, they're kind of, there's maps, particularly in relation to what principles, what guidelines to follow, that can help us a lot. But that's the most juicy question to me. How do we get there?
Yeah, you talk in Thrive 2 a little bit about this question of toleration. Like, how much are we going to tolerate? And at some point, I've actually, and I've been going in this direction too, where I've been analyzing things because, and I've almost joked about this, but I studied philosophy in school, right? I believed in logic and reason, and I thought if you can come up with a good logical argument, you can change the world for the better. And it's just real life has never worked out that way for me. I
Well,
really tried.
I noticed, I know that you were on our part of our discussion last Saturday, and when I reviewed the chat, I actually copied a message from you. It said cognitive dissonance is real. Reason
Yeah.
and logic do not work. So I think I know what you're saying, but describe a little more what you meant.
Well, it's just that people can't hear, it actually it's like the scientific method, and I'd like to talk to you about this a little bit later on, but it takes a heck of a lot of integrity to compose a logical argument and stick to it all the way to the end. And you have to be incredibly open-minded. Like any new set of data set, any new information that doesn't fit with your theory, anything at all, any little quirk that happens that doesn't fit with your theory, you have to be able to go, well, I got to alter my theory, or maybe I got to throw the whole theory out and start over again because it doesn't work. And there just are very, very few people who are willing to have that kind of integrity when it comes to processing their world around them. Instead, they there. And psychology, which is kind of where I'm going with this, I've started to use psychology a lot more to analyze things and to figure out how to work in this world, because we now know that you have a subconscious mind and that you develop a worldview, and it's very protected by this subconscious. And when it gets threatened, then you actually jump into fight or flight mode, and you're no longer in a situation where you can really think about things rationally. You feel threatened, and you're gonna, like you talked about, the people on the left, often they'll get triggered when you're having a conversation, and then they're shaming you.
Yeah.
This is in psychology, this makes sense. If you're trying to have a rational conversation with someone, you're like, will you just follow my line of thinking and then respond without using any logical fallacies? That's all I'm asking, but it never happens that way.
Kimberly and I've been talking about this a lot recently, and just trying to figure out the same thing you're trying to figure out, how can I have an actually effective conversation? And in terms of the psychology, we've come to the conclusion that, first of all, not to spend a whole lot of time arguing with people who don't feel like they actually want to learn anything.
Right.
We've realized that there are people who already know this. There are people who don't know but want to know if it resonates as true. And then there's still a large category of people who really don't want to know for the very reasons you're talking about. It's just too disturbing. So what that's led us to is realizing that it not only takes a certain amount of intelligence to question history and authority and follow the logic, but it takes a level of emotional maturity, the ability to stay centered when you're getting triggered by having your worldview disrupted. It takes a certain amount of self work. And I've asked a lot of people where I've had successful conversations. Oftentimes I'll really congratulate people and go, okay, tell me how you handled that when so many other people can't. And what one of the common denominators is, they either have had near-death experiences, they do a lot of meditation, they've done a lot of emotional work, a lot of therapy, a lot of martial arts, a lot of sports, something where they've actually trained themselves to be going for excellence and deal with their emotions and the challenges as they go. And that's given me more compassion for that. There are some people who've had such trauma in their lives, or they're so dependent on their job or their social group, that it just is too threatening to consider maybe actually Trump is saving our asses. As much of a crass macho goofball as he is, if you understand what he's actually been doing, it's a major shift. If it looks like opening up to voluntary exchange is going to threaten your job at the central bank or the government school or the government job or something like that, it to a lot of people, it's just not worth it. And I feel a compassion for that. And basically I say, okay, I honor your perspective, but don't get in my way when I'm trying to protect myself and the rest of our species.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that, I guess to continue with the psychological metaphor, there does come a time when you have to protect your boundaries. And certainly a mandatory vaccine, right? I mean, this is crossing a line that I hope a lot of people are going to, at that point say, thanks, but no thanks. You don't have control over my body, my body, my choice, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a really interesting one, because I do think that is the line in the sand that's coming.
Yeah, it seems that way.
And I think that I've been watching this very carefully. And when in Australia they announced the probability of mandatory vaccines, they got such huge pushback. There was 73% of the population that were polled instantly said, no way. And so I've seen people all over the world pull back from authoritarians pull back from the mandate conversation into the creepy convenience conversation. We will just make it so hard for you to live a life, to earn your living, to be with your friends, to keep your job, to go out in nature. Any make it so hard for you that ultimately you're going to stick out your arm and let us put our, our toxic chemicals and our chips and everything into your body finally.
Yeah. Yeah, it actually, I mean, it seems like what's coming down the pike in terms of that. And I mean, hopefully, uh, hopefully that will be a turning point, and people who think, I think more like you and I, who just think people should be allowed to live and let live, will make that boundary, and we can actually see some social change happening here. I've actually kind of had this theory because some people have interpreted, and I tend to agree with this interpretation about the mask wearing and the stay at home. And some people have, with the lockdowns and everything, have interpreted this as almost a form of ritual, like they're preparing us for what the World Economic Forum now is calling the Great Reset. And they're, isolation, self-isolation is something that often happens in ritual. They're sort of like cleansing the palate psychologically, so that then when the Great Reset happens, they can refill us with the social engineering program that they want us all to follow.
Yeah.
And I guess, there's a part of me that's really hoping that this could backfire on them. They could be cleansing the palate, and then the palate could be filled with these ideas of voluntarism. Like we actually have an opportunity. It's like, I mean, if you've done Aikido, the martial arts metaphor, when that extreme yang energy has to turn into yin eventually, and maybe we're getting to this place where they're pushing so hard that they're gonna over project, and it's not going to end up the way that they think it is, and that gives me hope. I'm trying to stay on the positive here, even though it is getting difficult.
I'm on exactly the same page there. I think it's going to
Mhm.
be ugly, and so many people are just indoctrinated by the mainstream media into hopelessness. But I do believe that because of the nature, I mean, I've known from day one what this was. We predicted it in Thrive One. We have one collage where it actually says this is what
I
the peak
did see
population
that. I
looks
did
like
see that
now.
pandemic.
Irradiation,
Hmm.
toxic vaccines, man-made pandemic. So
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised by this, but I've been watching it very carefully, and I'm clear that they don't want a hard war. They want a soft war where it's not clear to the resistance where to fight back.
Sure.
When you had a pharaoh, when you had a dictator, when you had a king, it was obvious where the source of authority was, and so they had to get more tricky and create this whole illusion of the government by the people thing, and where they could hide behind mob rule, basically, of democracy,
Yeah.
and actually be kind of invisible behind the scenes so that you couldn't go up against them. In fact, they were the ones you were paying to protect them. But now, as this is getting exposed, we're really in an information war. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, probably why you're doing what you're doing. Because
Yeah.
if we can wake up enough people, we can literally just walk away from their authoritarian pyramid, walk away from all of their governments, their airlines, their taxation, their schools, everything, just literally en masse, just turn around and walk away. And it will crumble overnight because they won't have the taxes, they won't have the buy-in to exert their authority. But meanwhile, they when you can't get on an airplane without a vaccine, you can't send your kids to school without a vaccine. So people are going to be more confused about, wait, I don't like this, I don't trust this, but what in the world can I do? And
Right.
that's what we're dedicated to, not only waking people up, but we're, as you know, that we're creating the next iteration of our solutions hub on our new website, which will allow people to coordinate their actions either locally or virtually, according to sector and issue, and following the non-aggression principles in collaborative modes that we have coached people on, in activist groups all over the world.
Hmm.
And the method has been incredibly successful in many ways. So I'm looking forward to giving some guidance to people who are waking up as to, yes, they've made it very confusing, but here's what you can do, and you can gather together with other like-minded people and take really effective action.
That's definitely where I've been going with it. Just trying to get my friends here locally to get together to say maybe we should start coordinating our gardens to make sure that we all can get enough food in case they tell us we are not allowed to go to the grocery store anymore. Start contemplating how to make our own medicines, setting up little alchemical labs.
What
That
area are you in?
I'm in Mendocino County. I'm just a couple hours north of you guys.
Okay, yeah. Well, I strongly encourage you to keep going on that, and let me know when you've got a group. Once we launch this website, we're going into beta test now, but after the first year,
Uh-huh.
we'll be launched. In fact, since you're part of the subscription group, you could join as that group very soon,
Great.
because I've been visiting with groups in Santa Cruz and groups in San Mateo and over in Silicon Valley, and groups in Hawaii and in Denver, and this is what's happening all over the world right now. That's why we want to give this hub to allow people to coordinate their actions, because if you've got a local freedom group, the
Mhm.
most important thing is that you've connected with each other and you have each other's mobile numbers or emails or something like that, so the entire group can mobilize within an hour if there's something that needs to happen. If Antifa is starting to attack people in their homes, or the government is starting to come into homes to try to forcefully to inoculate people and that type of stuff. And we've done this in Santa Cruz previously around some toxic aerial spraying, and it's super effective. And if the powers that be know that you are organized this way, they're much less apt to take actions that are going to be immediately resisted and publicized, not only locally but globally.
Yeah, absolutely. And people should think about going to thriveon.com and checking this out and becoming a subscriber, because I think this seems to be the next level of action that we can take, is just to start becoming self-sustaining without needing to be plugged into their system at all. We just don't need it. We can do this ourselves, and it can be a fun journey. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be horrible. It can just be us, taking back our own abilities to really take care of ourselves and be functional adults without leaning on authority to do that for us.
When I get to visit with these groups, it's so inspiring. People are so happy to have people that they can say anything with in conversation. People who aren't scared to death that if they don't have a mask on, they're going to kill their grandmother, something like that. But especially because they start getting organized around whatever issues are affecting them locally. And there's always experts in the group who really know about food preparation. They know about gardening. They
Hmm.
know about self defense. They know about legal matters. They know about media. There are artists in the group, therapists in the groups. It's really exciting to create a whole system locally, and then you can just steer it toward whatever invasion of your privacy they're trying next.
Yep. Yep. I mean, I guess, I'm glad I'm having this conversation with you because I'm feeling better already.
I'm actually ridiculously encouraged about this. As
Good.
people know from my films, I'm very much a realist, and
Yeah.
as a martial artist, you have to be a realist. But the fact of the matter is that in the last 9 years since Thrive One came out, Kimberly and I have been in the presence again and again of free energy devices, doctors who are curing 90% of cancer patients. There's shaman and breath workers and
Hmm.
so forth, and biofeedback people who are helping people expand their consciousness and find their own true self at record rates. And then for me, the ultimate encouragement is the growth of the awareness of the non-aggression principle, because that's the key to what unlocks all the rest of it.
Well, Foster, I could talk with you for hours and hours, but I know you have something coming up here in the next couple of minutes, so I'll have to let you go. Do you want to let people know where they can find out more about Thrive and check out the documentaries and take it to the next level?
Sure. Come to thriveon.com and you'll see we've got a trailer for the new film there. We've got the teaser, an energy teaser for the new film. And then we have Thrive 2. You can rent or purchase that. Thrive 1 is there also for free. And then if all of what we're exploring is intriguing to you, I encourage you to at least get on our email list. But if you really want to be active in the conversation, then subscribe. It's a $10 a month subscription to join our Freedom Portal. Basically, we spend Saturdays, a couple of hours on Saturdays, exploring these topics, and it's an interactive forum, and we bring top experts on and so forth. And then ultimately, if you really want to take action, if it makes sense to you, we'll be relaunching in the next couple of months. We'll be relaunching the Solutions Hub that I talked about earlier.
Well, sounds great, Foster. And I myself actually am a Thrive affiliate. So if you go to my website at theshiftnow.com, you can click on the link there on the homepage, and that'll take you to where you need to go to watch Thrive 2 as well. And I recommend going all out and doing the subscription. I think these guys are doing really good work, and I think that the more involved and the more people who will be involved, especially as this Solution Hubs comes online in the next month, we can really crowdsource all of our information, and I think we can start to make a real positive difference here in the world. So
yeah, I really encourage your audience, if this interests you, go through Doug's website in order to see the film, because we've got a fantastic global team of affiliates, and these are the people who have the understanding to recognize what we're up to and the courage to share it with their friends. So we really like to support that and support financially as well. People get compensated for being an affiliate, because this is a win-win-win situation that we're trying to encourage. So go through that website, and I really thank you, Doug, for the privilege of coming on your show. I love what you're doing.
Well, for sure. And thanks for coming on, because like I said at the beginning, you and Kimberly really do resonate with my own feelings on a lot of things. There's a lot of different, even in the whole quote unquote conspiracy theory world, a lot of different takes on this or that. But you guys are right there with me, especially in terms of utilizing the ancient knowledge and making this connection with modern science. And so definitely appreciate your work. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Take care. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, my conversation with Foster Gamble. I just love that guy. He and Kimberly are doing such great work with the Thrive documentaries. If you haven't checked those out yet, I urge you to go to thriveon.com and check them out. You can also get into their materials from my website, theshiftnow.com. Right on the front page, I'm an affiliate partner with these guys. I'm really trying to do what I can to help spread the word, and I was just so happy to finally get a chance to talk to Foster. I've been after him for months, certainly since I knew Thrive 2 was coming out, and I've been aware of these guys for many years. Had a chance to meet them a few years back, and really happy to get a chance to talk to Foster again for this episode of The Shift. Really interesting conversations. I noticed with Thrive, because Foster and I have a lot in common in terms of that we're really looking for ways to get people to transcend the left-right paradigm and start to work together against what we clearly perceive as an upper class that doesn't care about the left-right paradigm, but I think uses it in this form of divide and conquer. And it's so challenging to get the two sides to get together and have a conversation. And I really have done a lot of study into the left-wing philosophy, and I have a lot of respect for those people who want to help other people, who want to make sure that they get health care, and who want to make sure that they get at least enough, money to make it through the month to month. And I understand the impulse to really want to help people in this way. But I noticed in the Thrive 2 documentary, which is why I wanted to bring this up with Foster, they really came out at the end of the movie against socialism, and they're really supportive of this idea of living according to the non-aggression principle. So we got into that really in detail. And I was able to express some of my frustrations with the left, because right now they're getting so adamant about their point of view. It's the people on the left that I'm afraid are bringing in a lot of these fascist tendencies that we're seeing in the world today. We have governors here in the United States that have taken full executive control, shut down the legislature, called a state of emergency, and are now issuing edicts through executive orders. This is very frightening to me, these kinds of bold moves. The censorship that Foster and I talked about, bold moves, and I've had friends express delight when a news source that they disagreed with was canceled off of Facebook or off of YouTube. And I just really wonder. I mean, I've had friends that are starting to shame people who question whether mask wearing is really working to stem the tide of COVID, or if the lockdowns are helping save enough people from a disease compared to the economic devastation, the 34 to 40 million people that are on the verge of eviction, the 8 million people now in the United States that have been forced into poverty as a result of the lockdowns. Not because so many people have gotten sick, but because the government hopes that they're saving people, allowing people, giving people time before the vaccination, or they don't want the hospitals to overflow. We haven't seen a lot of this. We can't really prove how many people may or may not have been helped, but we can show you all of these people that are being hurt, really hurt bad. The number of middle class businesses that are going out of business. And then on the flip side, the number of billionaires who have doubled their wealth in the last 10 months. A massive suck from the middle class business owners straight into the pockets of the owners of Walmart and the owners of Amazon and the owners of Google. We can clearly see that the pharmaceutical corporations are making hundreds of millions and billions of dollars off of what's going on right now. And yet having the conversation about, like, maybe the lockdowns aren't worth it and people end up getting publicly shamed. I'm not I mean, it's not that I don't enjoy it, it's that I'm literally frightened. And it seems to be my left-wing friends that are imposing this absolute belief that what the government is doing is correct and that we shouldn't worry about it, and then calling my Republican friends Nazis or white supremacists because they agree with a few of the things that Trump has said. It just seems like a major overreaction. I think it's coming from the mainstream media entirely, that's starting to radicalize people both on the left and on the right, and it's not going to end well for us. So I really appreciated getting in depth with Foster about the left-right paradigm, how it's used to manipulate us, and what we can do to overcome it. And, we were able to discuss our arguments about why in a free society I think people should choose to be more or less socialist depending on their lifestyle preferences, but just, no need to attack others who feel differently. We can all get along, and we should all be focused on the upper classes that are really making bank off what's going on right now, and we should be together in opposing that and helping out our brothers and sisters that are hurting so badly financially as a result of these lockdowns. Just one example, but a great conversation with Foster about that. And I also really appreciated getting in and having that psychological conversation with him. I've been talking a lot about, as you all know, if you've been listening to the show, cognitive dissonance and this psychological approach to political discourse, because the rational approach really doesn't seem to work. And understanding that people get cognitive dissonance when they are confronted with ideas that are outside of their particular paradigm. Another reason to be frustrated with the left-right paradigm, of course, because people on the left have their talking points, people on the right have their talking points, and when you say, hey, how about these third, fourth, fifth, sixth other options that we have, they just don't want to hear it, or they think you're on the other side. But if we're going to move forward here, we need to transcend all of this and be able to start listening to each other and working together. And what a better person to do that with than Foster Gamble. It was great to talk to him about it. He's got a solutions hub that he's putting up on his website very quickly here, and believe me, he and Kimberly are very busy right now taking the whole Thrive concept to the next level and really applying things in the real world. So, still, if you want to check out the website and get involved, you can become a subscriber. And he's doing every Saturday now seminars, interactive seminars, dialogue seminars. So you can really participate with him in moving all of these ideas into the real world, out of the documentary and into the real world. So one other thing I wanted to mention in the members section, we then got into this concept of scientism, which is also one of my favorite subjects right now. Why people have this understanding or these fervent beliefs in what science says, and then can't, when you confront them with experts that disagree with their experts or peer-reviewed papers that disagree with their version of science, they're not able to shift their perception and understand that maybe science has discovered some new information, or maybe here's how science evolves and it's a little differently than you think. Instead, it's just another way, like the left-right paradigm. I think this belief in absolute objectivity of a scientism mythology that doesn't even reflect what many experts believe in a lot of cases. It's just another point of frustration for me. But Foster said actually that he was very optimistic about the way things are going. So I'm going to take him on that. It's easy for me to get kind of frustrated, especially as things are moving forward, depending on the community that you live in, I suppose. But it's easy for me to get frustrated and feeling like it's so challenging to get the word out that there is another way of viewing the world that maybe is a little bit more productive than that left-right paradigm that seems to so obsess so many people and prevent us in my community and in communities across the country from going forward. Again, as Foster and I were discussing, decentralizing power so that we can make choices as a community about our community rather than arguing over what our controllers are doing. Things that we really can't influence one way or the other, but nonetheless spending lots of time arguing back and forth, and getting nothing accomplished in terms of real freedom on the ground and a thriving future for ourselves and our families. So one more time, I'll give you that website. Go to thriveon.com. You can see the first Thrive documentary there and rent the Thrive 2. And also think about becoming a subscriber, and then you can get into a lot of these weekend conversations and other solutions hubs, other parts of the website that can help us all communicate and move forward together. I'm certainly signed up and looking forward to the next couple of years working as closely with Foster and Kimberly as I can to help them create a thriving world, because I think they're onto something. And also, if you're interested in checking out the member section and checking out the longer form versions of my podcast, please go to theshiftnow.com on the web. You can find all of my episodes there. There's actually a lot of free content. I've got over 120 interviews up there for free, and 20 plus videos now, long form videos for subscribers, adding one a week every week as we speak. So you can also go to The Shift with Doug McKenty. I'm on Facebook and YouTube. I've been spreading out. I'm on MeWe and Parler and Minds and LinkedIn, and I'm on BitChute now as well as YouTube. So trying to find a broader audience in a less censored environment. So you could probably find me on other social media sites as well. Thanks again for listening. I'll be back next week with another episode, and I want you all to have a great day and take care. We'll see you soon.